everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We got a listener request to do a deep dive into smoking, and we found this really interesting podcast episode to help us out.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's all about, the risks of smoking and, why people even start in the first place. But we're not going to just, skim the surface.
Right.
We're going to go way beyond just the, obvious health stuff and really get into the psychology behind it all.
That sounds really interesting, actually.
Lovely, right? So get ready for a wild ride, you guys.
Okay, I'm buckled up.
So one of the things that really jumped out at me in this podcast was how much money you actually spend on smoking.
Oh, yeah, totally. Like they said, if you smoke just one pack a day, you could end up spending over $3,500 a year.
That's insane.
I know, right? Think about what you could do with that money.
You could go on a really nice vacation every year.
Exactly.
Or buy a new car or something. It's crazy how much it adds up.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. And the podcast didn't just stop at money, They actually got into the nitty-gritty of how smoking physically affects your lungs.
Oh, yeah, the part about lung capacity.
Yeah.
It said that smoking can actually reduce your lung capacity by 10%.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah, that's like trying to run up a flight of stairs but only having 90% of your lung power.
Oh my gosh, I can barely make it up with 100%.
Right.
I always knew smoking was bad, but I never thought about the actual mechanics of it,
Yeah. It's kind of freaky when you think about it.
It is. And this podcast doesn't sugarcoat anything. They talk about how smoking increases your risk of developing some pretty serious stuff like COPD.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
It's a chronic lung disease that makes it really hard to breathe.
And there's no cure, right?
Sadly, no. It's often irreversible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's definitely a good reason to steer clear of cigarettes.
No kidding.
But I think what's really interesting is why do people start smoking in the first place, you know? Even when they know all the risks.
Right? What's the appeal?
Exactly.
Well, the podcast talked a lot about stress.
Oh, yeah, as a coping mechanism.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of people see smoking as a quick fix for anxiety or difficult situations.
Yeah, I can see that. It's almost like a ritual,
Totally.
Yeah.
They might feel like smoking helps them relax in the moment, but it's really a short-term solution with some pretty long-term consequences.
It's like a vicious cycle almost. You're stressed, so you smoke, but then smoking just adds to your overall health problems, which in turn creates more stress.
Exactly. It's like you're digging yourself into a deeper hole.
Yeah. And then there's the whole social aspect of it, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The podcast talks about how smoking can be, totally influenced by the people around us.
Especially for young people.
Oh, yeah, totally. If your friends are all smokers, it can feel like the cool thing to do.
Right. You want to fit in.
Yeah. Peer pressure is a powerful thing.
It is. I remember when I was in high school.
Oh, we don't have to go into that. But yeah, you get the idea. And the podcast even mentions how the media plays a role in this whole smoking thing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Think about all those movies and TV shows where characters are smoking.
Oh, yeah.
They always make it look so glamorous.
Right, like the classic image of a handsome actor lighting up a cigarette.
Exactly. Or a group of friends smoking and laughing together. It's all about creating a certain image, but it's totally misleading.
Definitely.
You rarely see those same characters struggling to breathe 20 years down the line.
Right, or dealing with all the health problems that come with smoking.
It's like they just skip over that part.
Yeah, they only show the cool side of it.
Exactly. And that's why this podcast really stresses the importance of education.
Oh, for sure.
We need to counteract those images with real information about the risks of smoking.
And the reality of what it does to your body.
Totally. But, besides all that social pressure and media influence, there's the big elephant in the room when it comes to smoking.
What's that?
Nicotine.
Oh, yeah, of course.
It's highly addictive, right?
Yeah. Well, absolutely. The podcast talks about how nicotine actually triggers the release of dopamine in your brain.
Dopamine. Isn't that the feel-good chemical?
Exactly. It's the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward.
Oh, wow.
So every time you smoke, your brain gets this little hit of dopamine.
And that makes you want more.
Yep. It creates a craving.
So it's not just a habit. It's an actual chemical dependency.
That's right.
No wonder it's so hard to quit.
Exactly. And the podcast talks about how when you try to quit, your body actually goes through withdrawal.
Oh.
Yeah. It can be pretty rough.
What kind of symptoms are we talking about?
Well, things like anxiety, irritability, difficulty concentrating.
Yikes. It sounds like you're trading one set of problems for another.
It can feel that way for sure. But the podcast also talks about the amazing benefits of quitting.
Oh, good.
Yeah, quitting smoking is one of the best things you can do for your health.
That's great to hear.
They really dig into the science behind it. Like, did you know that within just 20 minutes of your last cigarette, your blood pressure and heart rate start to return to normal?
Whoa, really? That's incredible. So it's like an immediate improvement.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And in the long term, your risk of developing smoking-related diseases decreases dramatically.
That's amazing. So what else happens long term?
Well, your lungs begin to heal, your circulation improves, and your sense of taste and smell actually come back.
Oh, wow. So you can like undo some of the damage.
To a certain extent, yes.
Yeah.
Your body's incredibly resilient.
That's so cool. I also read somewhere that your risk of heart attack drops significantly after just 1 year of being smoke-free.
That's right. And after 10 years, your risk of lung cancer is cut in half compared to someone who continues to smoke.
Wow, those are some serious reasons to quit.
Definitely.
It's not just about living longer, it's about living better.
Absolutely. Quality of life is huge.
It is. But quitting can't be easy.
Mm-mm.
What does the podcast suggest for people who are trying to kick the habit?
Well, they talk a lot about nicotine replacement therapy.
Oh, like those patches and gum.
Exactly. Things like that can be really helpful because they provide a controlled dose of nicotine.
So it's like weaning yourself off slowly instead of going cold turkey.
Precisely. It helps manage those cravings and withdrawal symptoms.
That makes a lot of sense.
Wow.
What about the psychological side of things, though? Like, how do you deal with the stress and the habits?
That's where finding healthy coping mechanisms comes in. The podcast suggests things like exercise, meditation, spending time in nature.
Oh, yeah. Those are all great ideas.
It's about replacing that unhealthy habit with something positive.
I love that.
And speaking of exercise, the podcast mentions how it can actually help with those feel-good chemicals we were talking about earlier.
Really? So it's like getting a natural dopamine boost.
You got it. When you exercise, your body releases endorphins.
Endorphins. What are those?
They're basically natural mood boosters. They have pain-relieving effects, too.
Wow. So it's like nature's own nicotine patch.
Yeah, exactly. But without all the harmful side effects.
That's amazing.
It is. So you're basically trading a bad habit for a good one.
That's a pretty awesome trade-off.
I think so, too. But even with all these strategies, quitting can still be really tough.
Yeah, I bet.
And the podcast really emphasizes how important it is to have a support system.
Oh, yeah, like people to lean on.
Exactly. Talking to friends and family, joining a support group, or even finding a therapist who specializes in addiction.
That can make a huge difference, I bet.
It can. It's all about having people to encourage you and hold you accountable.
It's like that saying, it takes a village.
Right. Quitting smoking is a personal journey, but you don't have to go it alone.
I love that. And even if you slip up, it's not the end of the world, right?
Absolutely. The podcast reminds us that setbacks are normal. The key is to view them as learning experiences and keep moving forward.
That's such a good point. It's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly.
Wow. We've covered so much ground already.
I know, right?
We've talked about the health risks, the psychology behind smoking, even some strategies for quitting.
It's been a lot of information.
It has. But there's still so much more to unpack.
Yeah, we've only just scratched the surface.
I'm ready to dive deeper.
Me too.
So before the break, we were talking about how important a support system is when you're trying to quit.
Yeah, definitely.
It really makes you think about like how much our environment and the people around us can affect our choices.
It's true. This podcast actually mentions this thing called social contagion.
Social contagion, what's that?
It's like this idea that certain behaviors can spread through social networks, like smoking, for example.
Oh, so like if you hang out with a bunch of smokers, you're more likely to start smoking yourself.
Exactly. It's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, it makes sense though. I mean, we're social creatures. We
Right.
tend to kind of mirror the behaviors of the people around us.
We want to fit in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's almost like a subconscious thing,
Totally. But, hey, if bad behaviors can be contagious,
Mm-hmm.
do you think good behaviors can be too?
Oh, that's an interesting thought. Like if you're surrounded by people who are all about healthy living,
Exactly.
would that make you more likely to adopt those habits too?
I think so.
Yeah.
Like, it's all about having positive role models and a supportive community.
It's like having your own personal cheering section.
Haha. Yeah.
Speaking of influence, I want to go back to that whole media thing we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the glamorous smoking in movies and stuff.
Exactly.
Not about it.
Well, the podcast mentioned how it's everywhere, but do any specific examples come to mind for you?
Oh, yeah, tons. Like Casablanca
Oh, yeah. Classic.
or Rebel Without a Cause.
Mm.
Smoking was like a character in those movies,
Totally.
It added this air of sophistication and rebellion.
Yeah. And even in newer shows, you see people lighting up when they're stressed or trying to look cool.
It's like a visual shortcut for those emotions.
Right. But what kind of impact do you think that has on viewers, especially young people?
Well, there's actually been research on this, and it suggests that seeing smoking in movies
Mm.
can make young people more likely to try it themselves.
Wow, seriously.
Yeah, it kind of normalizes the behavior and makes it seem less risky.
It's like subliminal advertising almost.
Right. You're not explicitly telling someone to smoke,
Right.
but you're creating this positive association with it.
That's kind of messed up when you think about it.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's not just movies either.
Oh, yeah. What else?
Like social media influencers,
Oh, yeah.
music videos.
Right.
They all sometimes portray smoking as like this symbol of status or attractiveness.
It's interesting, though, because smoking actually does the opposite.
What do you mean?
Like, it damages your health, it can make you less attractive in the long run,
Mhm.
and it ultimately limits your freedom because you become dependent on nicotine.
It's true. It's all about image versus reality.
That's why I think media literacy is so important.
No, totally. Like, we need to teach young people to think critically about what they see.
To question the messages they're being fed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to understand that what they see on screen isn't always the whole truth.
Yeah. It's about separating the fiction from reality.
Well said.
But, media isn't the only source of influence here. What about the role of parents and teachers?
Well, they're huge. The podcast talks about how early intervention is key.
Like, the sooner the better.
Exactly. Parents need to have open and honest conversations with their kids about the risks.
And schools should have good health education programs.
Totally. The more informed young people are,
Mm-hmm.
the better equipped they'll be to resist all those influences.
It's all about empowering them to make healthy choices for themselves.
I agree.
So we've talked a lot about preventing people from starting to smoke.
Yeah.
But what about the people who are already smokers?
What about them?
Well, we talked about strategies for quitting,
Mm-hmm.
but what about the impact of secondhand smoke on the people around them?
Oh, that's a really important point.
Yeah.
The podcast really drives home the message that smoking isn't just a personal choice.
Right.
It affects everyone around the smoker, too.
It's like a ripple effect.
Exactly. Secondhand smoke contains over 7,000 chemicals.
7,000.
Yeah, crazy, right?
That's a lot.
And a lot of those chemicals are known carcinogens.
Carcinogens, that means cancer causing, right?
Yep. And it's not just cancer either.
Oh, no. What else?
Secondhand smoke increases the risk of heart disease, stroke, respiratory illnesses.
Wow. And that's for non-smokers, too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's especially dangerous for kids and pregnant women.
Oh, gosh. Why is that?
Their bodies are just more vulnerable to those harmful chemicals.
That makes sense.
Yeah, like children exposed to secondhand smokes are more likely to have asthma, ear infections,
Yeah.
all sorts of breathing problems.
And for pregnant women, it can cause premature birth, low birth weight, even SIDS.
It's really scary.
It is. Those are some serious consequences.
They are.
Mhm.
It really shows how smoking affects more than just the smoker themselves.
It's like a chain reaction.
It is. The podcast even talks about the economic burden of smoking.
What do you mean?
Well, think about all the healthcare costs associated with treating smoking-related illnesses.
Oh, right.
Those costs are ultimately shared by everyone through higher insurance premiums and taxes.
It's like we're all paying the price for smoking, even if we don't smoke ourselves.
It's true. So you see, it's not just a personal health issue.
It's a societal issue.
Exactly.
Okay, so smoking is bad for everyone. We get it. But let's get back to quitting.
Okay.
We've talked about nicotine replacement therapy, finding healthy ways to deal with stress.
Mm-hmm.
But the podcast mentions some other strategies, too, that might be kind of surprising.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, they talk about the power of mindfulness and being really self-aware.
Oh, interesting.
Like if you pay close attention to your cravings and triggers,
Yeah.
you can start to notice patterns,
Right.
and then you can develop strategies to deal with them.
It's like you become a detective of your own habits.
I love that. So what kind of strategies are we talking about?
Well, the podcast suggests things like delaying your first cigarette of the day,
Okay.
or gradually reducing how many you smoke each day,
Oh,
or even just changing your routine to break the association between certain activities and smoking.
oh, I see. So like if you always smoke after dinner,
Mm-hmm.
maybe try going for a walk instead.
Exactly. It's all about breaking those ingrained patterns and finding new, healthy alternatives.
I like that. And the podcast also talks about setting realistic goals
Oh, yeah, for sure.
and celebrating those small victories along the way.
It's so important to acknowledge your progress.
Totally. Instead of focusing on this big, scary goal of quitting forever,
Right.
you break it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
Exactly. It's like training for a marathon.
Oh, yeah. Good analogy.
You wouldn't try to run 26 miles on your first day, right?
Definitely not.
You start small and gradually build up your endurance.
That's a great way to think about it.
It is.
So it's all about progress, not perfection.
You got it.
Speaking of progress, I'm curious about the long-term benefits of quitting.
Okay.
We've talked about the health improvements, but are there other positive changes that people might experience?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The podcast mentions a few that you might not expect.
Like what?
Well, for example, quitting smoking can improve your sleep quality.
Really?
Yeah, it can also boost your energy levels.
Interesting.
And it can even enhance your sense of taste and smell.
Wow, so you can like actually enjoy food more.
Exactly. Imagine being able to really savor the flavors and aromas.
That's awesome. And of course, we can't forget about the financial benefits.
Oh, right, all that money you save.
That $3,500 a year could go towards something much more fun.
Like a vacation or a new hobby.
Or even just paying off debt.
Exactly.
It's a win-win situation, really.
It is. You improve your health, you gain financial freedom, and you open up a whole world of possibilities.
It's amazing how quitting smoking can have such a ripple effect on your life.
It really shows the power of small changes.
I agree. It's inspiring.
It is.
Well, I don't know about you, but this deep dive has given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
We've covered so much.
Yeah, from the science of addiction to the social influences to the amazing benefits of quitting.
I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's been a real eye-opener.
It has. But before we wrap things up, I think we need to address the elephant in the room.
Oh, you mean vaping?
Yeah, exactly. It's become such a big topic, and I'm really curious to get your take on it.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Is it a safe alternative to smoking, or is it just another form of addiction?
Yeah, it's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, and it's a question that deserves a deep dive all its own.
I agree. We need to explore the science, the potential risks and benefits, the ethical considerations.
There's a lot to unpack.
There is.
So stay tuned, folks, because that's exactly what we're going to tackle in part 3 of this episode.
Ooh, I can't wait.
Okay, so we're back, and like we promised, we're diving into the whole vaping thing.
Yeah, it's a big one.
It is. And this podcast episode we've been talking about does a pretty good job of like laying it all out.
Oh, good.
Yeah, like the facts, the uncertainties, all the different opinions people have.
Right, because there are a lot of strong opinions about vaping.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I don't think there's a simple answer here, you know?
Definitely not.
But I think like the more we learn about it, the better we can understand it and make like, informed decisions.
Totally.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. What exactly is vaping?
So basically it involves inhaling this vapor.
Vapor, okay.
Yeah, and it's produced by these electronic devices. They're called like e-cigarettes or vape pens.
Oh, okay, I've seen those.
Yeah, and they have this liquid inside that usually contains nicotine flavorings and some other chemicals.
Oh, so there's still nicotine in it?
Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
But that's actually like one of the big debates about vaping.
How so?
Well, because nicotine is the addictive substance in cigarettes.
Right.
So some people argue that vaping is just another way to get hooked on nicotine.
Yeah, that makes sense. But how is it any different from smoking then?
Well, vapes don't have a lot of the other harmful stuff that's in cigarettes,
Like what?
like tar and carbon monoxide.
Oh, right. Those are the things that really mess up your lungs, right?
Exactly. They're the main culprits behind a lot of the smoking-related diseases.
Okay, so the argument is that vaping is like a less harmful way to get your nicotine fix?
Yeah, kind of like switching from regular soda to diet soda.
Oh, I see. So you still get the sweetness, but without all the calories.
Right. But with vaping, it's not quite that simple.
Oh, why not?
Well, the podcast makes it clear that even though vaping might be less harmful than smoking, it's still not risk-free.
Oh, cool.
Like, we're still learning about the long-term effects of inhaling all those heated chemicals.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like a new frontier.
It is. And we need more research to really understand the potential impact on our health.
So there's a lot we still don't know.
Exactly. But, I've also heard that vaping can actually be helpful for people who are trying to quit smoking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like the podcast talks about how for some people, it can be like a stepping stone.
A stepping stone to what?
To quitting altogether.
Oh, interesting. How does that work?
Well, you can gradually reduce the amount of nicotine in your vape liquid.
Oh,
So it's like slowly weaning yourself off.
So it's kind of like those nicotine patches and gum we talked about earlier?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But maybe vaping is more appealing to some people because it still feels like smoking.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, you're
Yeah.
still going through the motions.
Right. But then there's the other side of the argument
Which is?
that vaping is actually a gateway to smoking.
Oh, yeah, especially for young people.
Exactly. Like maybe they wouldn't have ever picked up a cigarette.
But they start vaping and
And then they get hooked on the nicotine and eventually move on to cigarettes.
That's scary.
It is. And the podcast mentions that there is some research to support that idea.
Ugh, so it's like a double-edged sword.
Kinda, yeah. Like on the one hand, it could help some people quit.
But on the other hand, it could be getting a whole new generation hooked on nicotine.
And it's especially worrying because young people's brains are still developing.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
They're more vulnerable to addiction.
exactly.
It's a tough situation for sure.
The podcast really emphasizes that we need more research to figure this all out.
Like to know for sure what the long-term effects are.
And to understand how vaping affects both people who are trying to quit smoking and people who have never smoked before.
Yeah, we need that data.
We do. It's a constantly evolving landscape, so we've
Yeah.
got to stay informed.
Totally. Knowledge is power.
For sure.
Okay, so we've talked about the science, about the potential risks and benefits of vaping, but there are also some ethical concerns here, right?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. The podcast talks about how some vaping companies are using marketing tactics that seem to target young people.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those ads.
Yeah.
Like with all the fun flavors and colorful packaging.
Exactly. It's kind of unsettling when you think about it.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to make it seem cool and appealing to kids.
Right. And that's a problem because we know that vaping can be harmful, especially to developing lungs.
It definitely raises some questions about corporate responsibility.
It does. And it makes you wonder if we need stricter regulations to protect young people.
Yeah, like maybe we need to be more careful about how these products are marketed.
I agree.
It's a good reminder that we need to be critical consumers, you know?
Totally. We can't just blindly accept everything we see and hear.
We need to think for ourselves and make informed choices.
Well said.
So it sounds like the bottom line is we still don't know everything about vaping.
That's right. There's still a lot of research to be done.
But we do know that smoking is definitely harmful.
Oh, absolutely.
And that quitting is one of the best things you can do for your health.
No doubt about it.
And whether vaping can help people quit or if it just leads to another addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a question that each person needs to answer for themselves.
Right. It depends on your individual circumstances and how much risk you're willing to take
Exactly.
and your overall commitment to a healthy lifestyle.
I agree. But I think the key takeaway here is knowledge is power.
Absolutely. The more we know about vaping, the better equipped we are to make smart choices.
For ourselves and for the people we care about. Well, this deep dive has been amazing.
It has.
We've explored so much about smoking and vaping.
From the science to the psychology to the ethical dilemmas.
It's a complex issue for sure.
It is. But I feel like I have a much better understanding of it now.
Me too.
And it's inspiring to see how many resources and strategies are out there to help people quit.
It is. There's hope for everyone.
There is.
So to everyone listening out there, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
And remember, you're not alone in this journey.
There's support out there if you need it.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.